Hello and welcome to the ACS 4.2 What's New. I'm your host, Mike Foster, Principal PMM at Red Hat and StackRox Community Co-Chair. I'm joined with Boaz Michaeli, a Principal PMM from ACS. We're going to be taking you through what's next in 4.2, along with some big announcements. So I'll kick it off with the big one. ACS now has a cloud service trial. That's a 60-day free trial, no obligations. You can sign up and get started. I did it within 5 minutes yesterday. It was perfect, super easy. So if you ever want to evaluate the product, or if you're looking to use StackRox and you want to test it out in a, let's say, low effort mode, feel free to do that. Links are down below. Moving on to the big news, and that's 4.2. And that's a packed release that we have, especially coming off the big releases from 4.0 and 4.1. So remember our first major release in, it feels like half a decade with 4.0. So big upgrades in the cloud service launch. So we're keeping the momentum going. 4.2, again, is packed, so packed that I couldn't even fit all the features on the little slide. We have platform enhancements, vulnerability management, and network security being the core 3 topics that we're going to go through. Coming up first, we're going to be talking platform. That means bring your own database in tech preview. Core BPF is GA, compliance dashboard updates, and usage data report for licensing. I know that was a mouthful. Boaz, hopefully you can take us through those 4 to kick us off.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit of color, but quickly go over this. Bring your own database for Postgres. So as you mentioned with 4.0, that's a major release. We're using Postgres. The idea is that you can bring your own Postgres, whether you're using the cloud or on-prem. It is in tech preview. You can find in the release notes exactly how to do that. And we urge you to go ahead and try that out, especially if you have plans to use it in production. This is the time to check it out and let us know what you think. Core BPF, we announced it earlier as a tech preview. It is now GA. Now, Core BPF is really important because it gets rid of the kernel drivers, right? It will become the default mode in the future. Right now, it is not the default. You have to set it up yourself. Again, look at the release notes, how to do that. Highly recommended. It will become the default, maybe even in 4.3. I'm not exactly sure, but pretty soon. The other thing that you've mentioned, Mike, is we've improved some of the performance for the compliance dashboard. Actually, some pretty impressive numbers. So for people who are using that compliance dashboard, you'll notice a significant improvements, like in the cold start time, twice as fast, and right, like 7 to 10 times speed boost after caching. Again, different people may have different experiences. If you're using that, let us know what you see. Let us know if you find that better. Now let me talk about this usage data report. This is what customers have been asking us, is really for licensing. Customers are self-reporting. We don't track your usage of ACS, but now you can report on, or you can actually see for yourself how much the product is consuming in terms of CPU units on your secure clusters and the node count, because these are the 2 parameters that you need to report for licensing. And we aggregate those hourly, and you can download a report with a dated range.
Sweet. Thanks, Boaz. So we have customer customization, let's say, with bring your own database. Core BPF, that's compile once, run everywhere. BBPF, so that makes engineering so much smoother and easier for updates. Dashboard performance, always welcome. Hitting that scan button and having it go faster, and nobody's going to argue with that. And then the usage data report for licensing. All right, on to bigger things. Bigger, better, more secure things. Platform is fun, but vulnerability management is always more fun. We have delegated image scanning in the graphic user interface. We have registry mirrors in OpenShift, policies using CVE age, and fixability. That's a big one I'm very excited for. The CVE reporting features are getting an upgrade, allowing you to be more flexible and powerful. And then scanner updates. So we have more operating system versions that the ACS scanner can maintain. You want to break those 5 things down for us, please, Boaz?
So with vulnerability management, we need to first of all talk about delegated scanning. Mike, how people might have issues on scanning registries if they're disconnected?
People love private registries, and there's always proxy issues and random things that people have set up, right?
That's right. And especially with ACS-CS, where we're hosting Central, people found themselves or might find themselves with, hey, I don't want your ACS Central to have direct network connectivity to my registries. So Central obviously has network connectivity to the secured clusters, but doesn't have to go all the way to the registry. The secured cluster, on the other hand, which is your cluster that you control, does have access to your registry. So we're leveraging that in what we call delegated scanning. We have on each secured cluster what we call the scanner slim that was introduced way back only for OpenShift, but now it's actually on every secured cluster. There's a scanner slim, has its own slim database too. And all it does, if it's delegated, all it really needs to do is scan and index that registry. It then sends all the information up to Central. So Central continues to work as usual, but by doing that delegation, you've solved the disconnection problem. We're now able to scan disconnected registries. Now, all of that was already introduced in 4.1. But in 4.2, we're doing two things. One is you can now configure that delegation in the UI, because in 4.1, you had to do it in API. And the second thing is we have leveraged that to introduce this additional feature for we can now scan registry mirrors in OpenShift. Because registry mirrors really just, they look to us as if they're disconnected. They're local to that cluster. They're mirrored. And the nice thing about it is we just read the way you set it up in OpenShift, where you don't have to do anything special, whether you use the custom resources in like image content source policy, follow the notes for the details. But there's 3 ways to set it up. One, 2 of them are actually deprecated in OpenShift, but we still support that. So whichever way you set it up in OpenShift, we're going to read it, and now we're able to scan those registry mirrors in OpenShift.
Sweet. And now on to policies and reporting. Now, this is a hot topic: CVE fixability and time since first seen in the cluster. These are very important metrics that security teams always like to know. When did a vulnerability get introduced? How long has it been in the system? Is it fixable? They want to know what they should worry about, right? And this information has always been in ACS. Now we're giving you the power to craft policies around it, correct?
That's exactly right. This is interesting. Customers have told us, hey, you know what? We realize that it's going to take us time. It's going to take our developers time to address these issues, and it's too much noise. If you flag that violation right away, it's too much noise. We want to be able to control the way that we pop those alerts up. And these 3 new criteria now, you can build policies that specifically take that into consideration. So is the CV fixable? Maybe you don't want to alert if it isn't. That's another conversation about how to address that, but definitely something that customers have asked us. So you can now build a policy that only fires if it's fixable. And you can also craft your policy to look at how long have I had this problem in my setup, whether it was discovered in one particular image or in any one of my images across my installation. You can now craft a policy that says, you know what? I don't want this to trigger unless it's already been in the system for 10 days. So you can do those types of policies now with 4.2. We've also just upgraded operating system versions with Scanner. So, Scanner is now up to date with Alpine, Debian, and Ubuntu, our latest versions. But going back to vulnerability reporting. So let's talk about VM 2.0. As everyone hopefully is aware, we're introducing that feature by feature. We've got them side by side. And so in 4.2, Vulnerability Management 2.0 now has CVE reporting. And the way that this reporting works is you can create it on demand, or you can download it, and it's in CSV format. You've got all the rich details that you need. So you've got all the flexibility that you had in 1.0, but more, because you can on demand is actually new, and downloadable is something that we didn't have in 1.0. So in 2.0, you can schedule this, you can do it on demand, You can download it. You can send it through a notifier. So you've got all of the benefits that were in 1.0 plus all the missing features. Now that's part of 2.0.
Very cool. On to the last section that we have. We're talking network security, and that's runtime network policy generation, build time network policy tools, and the new listening endpoints in the graphic user interface. 3 very big and very cool tools to play around with if you want to get the chance. Boaz, take us away.
Absolutely very cool. One of my favorite topics is network security. With runtime, you know how we've expanded and improved the network graph. It's really a network graph 2.0, if you will. We came back to network policy generation in this release, and we've improved the way that you can generate network policies to be specific to the scope that you're interested in. So let me elaborate on that a little bit. In the filter for network graph, you can choose what you want to look at. You can choose a cluster, a namespace. You can go down to deployments. The network graph will show you what you've selected with a solid background, but also show you related areas. Those are not areas that you selected, but we have to show them to you because there's something going on with them. You have flows coming in or out of these other namespaces or other deployments. But now you want to generate network policies only for what you've selected. And this is what you can do now. In that view, even though you're seeing other deployments, we're focused on what you selected. And now you can generate network policies from the runtime model only in what you've selected. And there are a few other bells and whistles here after you've selected that, generate and hit the button to generate and simulate policies. Now the network policies show what we've generated only for those deployments, and you can even go and compare what it was just generated to whatever is right now live in your cluster. So you can really visualize and validate what the impact of what you just did. Which of course brings us to shift left. Because shift left is a different way to generate network policies. It's actually looking at a different persona. We've introduced the RHACS Cuddle Netpool Generate tool. It's all in tech preview. That is a build time synthetic analysis technology. We analyze a directory with YAML deployments, and we generate a network policy based on what we see. As a developer tool, this is the way. So in fact, let me go back and say, we want developers to have network policies, but until now they're really struggling with, well, how do you want me to do that? This is really, really difficult. And of course we can have a whole webinar just on that. So the fact is now you can enforce, or you can check in the pipeline, hey, this deployment doesn't have a network policy. Go ahead and use these tools to build, debug, develop your network policies, and then bake them into the process. So these 2 additions that we've introduced now, and that's all part of this tool set, if you will, is connectivity map and connectivity diff. With connectivity map, again, we look at that folder structure, we look at that network policy that's already there, presumably generated by the previous step, and we provide a visualization. It could be a text-based, like Markdown, CSV, or a DOT format. By the way, a nice thing about DOT, there are extensions to VS Code. You can...
Go back to DOT. Start the sentence again.
Yeah. So by the way, the nice thing about DOT is there are extensions for VS Code. Pretty much double click. You can even play around with that visualization within VS Code. You can do things like search. But in any event, this just gives you a basic understanding of, hey, this is the impact of the network policies on my workloads. This might not be trivial at all. You can have quite complex situations, right? And then the new tool that we are adding now is connectivity diff. And this addresses your development process. Consider you have 2 branches. You've worked on it. You've developed your network policies. Now you've got a new branch. You added maybe a workload. Consider an example where we've added a workload, we've generated a network policy, but you want to make sure, you want to validate that change. So with diff, with semantic diff, I must say, we analyze the workloads with the network policies, and we show you only what's changed in terms of what connections were added or removed, and of course, what ports are now being used. This solves the problem of, if you were just going to compare those YAMLs, you have no idea really what's going on. It's quite impossible for you. But with semantic diff, it's very easy. You can really see what has changed, and you can validate your work as your in your normal development cycle.
On to the last point for the release, we have a new listening endpoints in the graphic user interface. This has been a project in the works for a while. It's GA. You'll check it out in the network graph dashboard. Boaz, a little color on the topic, please.
Exactly as you said, this was already available in API. Some customers are extremely sensitive to what's going on in their network, especially telco sector is one of them. But a lot of security teams, they want to answer the simple or not simple question of, tell me which processes are listening on which ports. And there's actually no way to answer that question. There is no tooling anywhere in OpenShift or Kubernetes to answer that question, outside of some CNIs may be able to do that. I'm not aware, but not out of the box. So with ACS now, this is what we introduced in the API, and now in GUI, very simple, very easy to see. You have a list of processes. You can of course filter them by namespace cluster down to deployment, and you can see the detail of which process is listening on what port, what's the exit path of that process, and really have all that detail that customers have asked for.
Very cool. Boaz, I wanted to thank you for joining. Again, 4.2 release will be out September 18th. If you're watching this, it's probably out, and all the documentation is linked below. If you want to test out 4.2 very easily, you can always sign up for the cloud service trial. 60 days, again, free. Test it out. We would love your feedback. Again, I'll post the Slack channel for StackRox as well if you want to get in touch with the community leads. Until next time, hopefully in November or December for the next release, Boaz, I want to thank you for coming on. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hope everyone has a good rest of their day.